So, I was really busy this week, and it's no excuse. We're going to be doing this thing down at Chico tonight, leading our worship down there. The worship team is so a little preoccupied. But I think we have 2 more classes. There's no way we're going to get through all this. We might. It's freezing in here, I know. I opened the door. Is that what you said?
I don't feel good. Fine.
She said it's freezing in here.
It's freezing in here. I know, I opened the door earlier, but it didn't let me. I put a piece of paper up there, but it doesn't seem to be working. Okay. Let me read something to you. This is our most study thing. So he says, and we're trying to kind of wrap up. I know I said that last week, but we're still trying to. Becoming a true worshiper involves taking on several characteristics, aside from just giving our praise to God in an outward manner. Because worship is a natural reaction to our salvation, our lives must reflect on a daily basis Christ and His will for our lives. We must be involved in outreach, calling others to become worshipers, giving our time, talents, and resources, living lives that are holy and acceptable to God, following the commandments to love our neighbors as ourselves, and seeking to be all that God would have us be. Our lives must reflect Christ in all that we do. How can we give praise to God and hate our brother? Becoming a true worshiper is more than just what we do in our worship services. It is a lifestyle of evangelism, spiritual growth, worship and praise, discipleship and giving. It is discovering who God made you to be, identifying your life's mission and calling and pursuing it with all you are. So I first read this last night. He says we must be involved in outreach. And I was thinking about the excuses that I've used and that I've heard this album, like, I'm just a quiet person and stuff like that. I was wondering if we could talk about that. Or if you feel like you do need to do outreach. Or is...
I just read something this week, and I don't remember where or who, but it said the same thing. It said that in order to worship, or in order to, to do God's work, you have to do outreach. You have to serve, to fulfill all that whole circle of things that we need to do. And for me, it's like when I go to the House of Hope, the day I have to go, the week before, I'm like grumbling about it, and just, it's exhausting. It's exhausting emotionally for me, just because of my background, I guess, and so I have to really work myself up to go. But when I go, I am so, what's the word? Filled. I'm so filled with their encouragement, and so I think that I don't think there's any excuse.
Richie?
I think you just reminded me of something. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like a man who looks at his face in the mirror, and after looking, he forgets. Anyway, James. Totally reminded me of
James. Well, yeah, when I first read this, I've been kind of frustrated with ministry and stuff, and not lack of involvement, because most of my stuff is going okay. It's just some of the other involvement things. Are you going to share your coffee? It smells really good. There's just like a lack of involvement, and I just wonder if we're missing the boat on that.
There's been a few times in my life where you come across something happens that so energizes you that you cannot help, because it's so tremendous and wonderful. And I don't know if it's because of a lifetime of trying to maintain that is a little hard. But in a sense, it's really Christianity is the same thing, and that's why you see a lot of new Christians that way, because that's how they feel. They're just so excited about it. And it's, for some reason, it's wears off.
Yeah.
Time and life and family and all these things. That's how I like thinking.
That's true, and it just always reminds me of how on fire everyone is after camp.
Exactly.
That lasts
Yeah.
a while, and then you get your same old thing, and then you're like, I need a little spiritual boost, and thank God for things like Pepperdine, or
Exactly.
I'll go to Zoe, and I'm filled again, and I can, remember.
But ideally, our Sunday service should always.
supposed to be
provide it. It really should. Now, maybe it won't be always at the same level,
No.
we're not always consistent.
Well, it's not going to be.
But I think a lot of it's what Thomas was talking about here too, the fact that throughout the week, we ourselves are doing certain things that when we come to service, collectively, we can have that sense because of what we're doing in our own lives. And if we're not, then maybe that's an area we can think about.
It reminds me of, who is it that says that they go to Bethel to get filled up on the Spirit? Susan. They're feeling lonely, go to Bethel. Now, that wouldn't work for all of us, I can understand that, but that's what works for us. So let me read one more thing and then we'll look to the Bible. As we seek to become the worshipers that God would desire each of us to be, we must understand that our emotions should not keep us from worshiping. Our emotions should not keep us from worshiping. We do not worship only when it feels right. Worship is not always a euphoric experience. It can be and will be on some occasions, but in becoming a true worshiper, our feelings cannot be the reason we worship. Worshiping each day of our lives is what God created us for. He knew that we would have good days when it was easy to worship Him, and that there would be bad days when we didn't feel like worshiping Him. Those who truly love Him will sacrifice self to worship the living God continually. So let's look at some instances where this happened. Job is the first one, Job 1:13 through 22. We all know the story of Job, but it's always nice to, or hopefully we all know it. It's nice to hear it again. It's Job 1:13 through 22. John, will you read that for
Sure.
us?
One day when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabaeans attacked and carried them off. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the fire of God fell from the sky and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties and swept down on your camels and carried them off. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. And while he was still speaking, yet another messenger came and said, your sons and daughters are feasting and drinking wine at the older brother's house. When suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house, and collapsed in them, and they are dead, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you. At this, Job got up, tore his robe, shaved his head, and he fell to the ground and worshipped, and said, naked I came from my mother's womb, naked I departed. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. And all of this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. Fell and worship.
He fell to the ground and worshiped. And I mean, not all of these things have probably happened to us, or to this level.
Certainly not in one day.
But I was thinking those we have those days where, like, you know, the battery's dead in the car, and then you get that fixed, and you get to work, and you forgot something, and then just like on and on and on and on. And then at the very end of all this craziness, you know, he fell to the ground and worshiped. So he knew what he was supposed to do. And it wasn't, he didn't go to God in prayer and say, help. You know, he went to God and worshiped. And I'm sure that asking came afterwards. And that kind of goes back to the prayer thing that we did. The Acts model of prayer was adoration, confession, thanksgiving, and supplication. And so, I mean, that's not, you know, in the Bible necessarily, but it kind of follows the pattern. It follows the pattern. The Acts thing isn't, but it follows the pattern of the Lord's Prayer. So anyway, so there's a really good example of somebody who has, you know, been taken to the depths, and then he falls to the ground and worships. Let's look at Isaiah, or no, excuse me, 2 Samuel 12, 18 through 20. Look that up. Samuel 12. You got that?
2 Samuel 12.
2 Samuel 12, 18 and 20. 18 through 20.
On the 7th day, the child died. David's servants were afraid to tell him that the child was dead, for they thought While the child was still living, we spoke to David, but he would not listen to us. How can we tell him the child is dead? He may do something desperate. David noticed that his servants were whispering amongst themselves, and he realized that the child was dead. Is the child dead, he asked. Yes, they replied, he is dead. Then David got up from the ground. After he had washed, put on lotions, and changed his clothes, he went into the house of the Lord and worshipped. Then he went to his own house, and at his request they served him food, and he ate.
So obviously this is where David's son dies, child dies. And again, you know, we saw examples, or at least talked about the examples through the Psalms of the things that David went through in his life and how he always came back and he praised. And so, you know, that's like the most hardest thing somebody can go through. And he's praying there. So these men, Job and David, were true worshipers of God. And they're characterized, you know, by their understanding of where their focus really needs to be. In good times and in bad, they come to God and they worship. And in these two times, they weren't expecting, you know, comfort or anything like that. And I mean, that's obviously a byproduct of when we do come to the Father. But worship was the first thing they were giving. So we have this instinct of worship in us, and we talked a little bit at the very, very beginning about how, you know, everybody, whether they are a Christian or an atheist like we talked about last night, or anything, you know, they have worship inbred in them. I mean, it's something that God has given us. And so even though we know that, we still need to learn how to worship. So let's look at Psalm 89:15. We have this desire in us, but we still need to learn. 89:15. So 14, it says, righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. Love and faithfulness go before you. Blessed are those who have learned to acclaim you, who walk in the light of your presence, O Lord. Now, I would say it's a little bit of a stretch to say that we have to learn, but obviously we do. We talked about, you know, how our own upbringing kind of forms our types of worship, or our outward signs of how we are going to be worshiping. The book said that, you know, even when, you know, we have a child, we teach them to write and to speak and all of those things. And worship is, you know, it's just another part of our lives that, you know, we have to learn. And we read, I don't know if it was in Psalms, but how, you know, we need to teach it to our children. You know, it's something that we need to teach. So let's look again at John 4:23, and we are kind of trying to wrap this up. John 4:23. That's kind of where we started. Verse 23. Jesus, the Samaritan woman at the well. So 23 says, yet a time is coming and is now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth. So what is it that the Father seeks? The Father seeks worshipers, not worship. He's seeking the worshipers. So, let me read this, because, you know, when I first started this, I was like, what is this whole truth and spirit? And I did a whole bunch of study, and I'm still confused. But this seems to put it into light. You may not agree with it, but what does it mean to worship in truth? Consider this. Do Muslims worship in truth?
Yes.
They do worship. In fact, they're very sincere. They are totally committed to their worship, and that can be applied to almost any religion. You know, they're very sincere, and they're totally committed to their worship. They believe that they are worshiping the one true God. However, we know that they do not worship the God of the Bible. In order to understand the one true God, you have to know and understand the Bible. You must know this God through personal relationship, like we talked about. And in John 14:6 it says, Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. The expression to worship him in truth refers to the worship that is in keeping with the nature of God. It is worship that is love-filled and love-based. We talked about the greatest commandment. It is pure in its motive to please the one true God. And that, we talked about the different forms that we kind of take on for worship. And that really, puts it in really good terms, because with more conservative people, they feel like if you're raising your hands or you're flagging or you're doing some type of spiritual dance, your motives aren't, like we're saying, you're just showing love. But here, this worship is love-based. It's pure in its motive to please the one and true God. So really, that could be just about anything. It's pure in its motive to please the one true God. Most importantly, it is worship that recognizes that the only way for us to enter God's presence is through Christ. That is the truth of the Bible. So when he's saying we need to worship in spirit and truth, that's the truth part, is it's Jesus. It's Jesus.
Do Muslims believe in Jesus?
I think they believe him as a prophet.
Prophet, right?
No. So what is it to worship the Father in Spirit? It is simply, and this is what we talked about at the very beginning of class, it's simply our spirit coming into contact with his spirit. We talked about, there was like the red arrow, which was like revelation of God, and then the blue arrow was us and our response to that revelation. Our response to salvation. His spirit comes, our spirit comes to him, and where those two arrows intersect is where the true worship in spirit happens, where our spirits are together. Let's look at Isaiah 29:13. I'll read that here. You read that?
Yeah.
Sorry.
The Lord says, "These people come near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship of me is made up only of rules taught by men."
And so, there's always going to be a little bit of that. Our cultural rules about what is appropriate and what is not. But I think sometimes, we talked about the whole pendulum about, everything inside, everything, in my spirit, to where you can't see it, or going the other way, and, cartwheels and rolling down the aisles and all of that, showing our, worship to God. But it all comes down to the pure motive. And, and really it's the culture thing. We have our own church culture, and it's different than the Anderson church culture, and it's, different than the Bethel church culture. It's just the way that it is when we bring anybody together.
Well, and culture changes, because I was talking to Jane Bonner years ago about, it was when we were in Pepperdine together with them, and we were at a Zoe thing, and both Daryl and Jane wanted to raise their hands, but it was really hard for them because of their culture. But we got to talking about it, and she said, the church that I grew up in, we kneeled. It was very common. Everybody kneeled at their church. And it was the Church of Christ. She was raised in the Church of Christ. And then that went away. So that culture changed. But kneeling was very common, at least in her. I think she grew up in Southern California, I think. Anyway.
That's the way it was over in Fort Sumner, Church of Christ.
Yeah.
Somebody kneeled.
She grew up kneeling. And so culture's changed too.
Can I ask you a question, Tommy? I seem, I may be way off base here. I seem like you're a little frustrated the way we're.
No.
Well, if you could change the culture about our church life, what would you change?
I don't think it changed
Maybe
anything.
angry, not frustrated.
Okay. Well,
I'm not frustrated at all. The only thing that I'm frustrated with is somebody saying you can't do something because it makes me feel uncomfortable. When I'm coming at it with a pure motive,
yeah.
because the same could be said that, say, you're raising your hands and that makes me feel uncomfortable, or you're sitting there not doing anything, that makes me feel really uncomfortable, But I love the thing about our church culture is I think that we are open to growth, and we actually have dialogue, and we don't just say, well, I'm going to go to a different church then, I would not change anything. I'm just saying, the only reason I wanted to have this class was mainly to have this discussion, and I'm probably going to have to teach it again, but was mainly just to have this discussion and just to get it out there, because we don't really talk about, it's okay to express yourself, I would love to do some experiential worship times, where we can come together and we can sing and we can go express ourselves in art, where we can, Aaron and I were talking about art and music and all of those things, and the people that have the gift of art are passionate about it, and that passion it's a God thing. We're supposed to find our passion in our walk as far as what ministry we're going to get into or whatever, and it could be just evangelism or something like that. But some people, they really do have this gift of art, and those people in our tradition have kind of been that's not an acceptable form of worship or an acceptable expression.
You're talking about what Barry did? You showed me accelerated.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it could be,
And I'm not saying that.
I was just gonna say, when we go to the Zoe conferences, there's a person who signs, that's her gift. And she signs for hearing impaired, but let me tell you, I get so much from, I end up watching her instead of what they might be doing on the screen or whatever because of her expression. And it's a form of worship in itself, not just doing the signing, but it's.
She's good.
Well, and because when we went to Zoe last time, I was sitting there in Nashville, and I told this story. There was people around me that just could not sing, but they were totally worshiping God, and it was beautiful to listen to them sing. And it wasn't Richie J. It was beautiful to listen. It was beautiful to listen to these people worshiping, and to be able to hear their heart song to God. And the same when we go and you see this lady signing, she's signing her worship in outward form, and you can see it rather than hear it. And it's beautiful to watch because you're seeing her just totally, singing out her heart song just in that way.
It's like opening up, to me, it's like she's opening up her soul for you to see everything about, there's no inhibitions with when you do that. And so it's just, that brings me closer to my worship with God when I see her.
Rich and I found a scripture last night
Can I read this? This is from Revelations. It's to the church at Ephesus. I know your deeds, your hard work, and your perseverance. I know that you cannot tolerate wicked men, that you have tested those who claim to be apostles but are not, and have found them false. You have persevered and endured hardship for my name, and have not grown weary. So these are all the things they were doing right. Yet I hold this against you. You have forsaken your first love. And that was a very striking sentence to me, because I thought about not necessarily our church, just the church. We try to follow all these rules and make sure we do everything right. Have we forsaken our first love, Christ? I think that we should all be examining that at all times. This was a church that was striving to do everything right, yet they kind of missed the boat. You just reminded me.
But I think part of, if you want to be in the right, and as far as, we do need to try and, follow what the Bible says about how to conduct worship and how to conduct ourselves. But you need to be able to say, we might make mistakes, and that's okay. Because I think the way that it used to be is we don't want to make any mistakes. No mistakes, no mistakes. So if we do end up doing some type of experiential worship, and it just feels wrong for whatever reason. Say, we're just not going to do that. You know, that obviously is not right for us, or it's obviously just, you know, we're just going to do something else. And if we get into that whole factor of just like, you know, I know that this right in here is good and right, so we're not going to experience anything else and experience anything.
Yeah, and I think maybe in response to your statement there, Stephen, part of it is the sense of, I think Christians would think and say that about other Christians, and they would have that attitude, well, you know, that's not right, or that's inappropriate, that they wouldn't have the sense of being willing to experience that. And then the idea that we are the Pharisees and we're trying to, you know, that scripture is right, we're trying to follow the truth, and so our definition of truth becomes all these rigid rules that we create, most of them we create ourselves, but then that becomes how we live by it, and not really realizing the spirit of it, the fact that we've lost our first love. And it's just the idea that, you know, this is not what Christ wanted, and we've got to be very careful about that. But how do you change that and do it in a loving way and still honor those people? You don't want to kick them out. You want to say, well, you know, if you're not going to go along with this, we don't want you here. But that's not right at all. But you know, you have to move forward, and that moving forward quite often, some people might, because they just can't accept it, and there's nothing you can do about it. But in order to move on, you have to do that sometimes.
A whole other group of people, like it's just a really big struggle, because we have people that are very rooted in the way that they want to do things. But then you also have this whole other group of people that if you just cater to that one group of people about the way that they want to do it, you're just going to not be able to minister to these people at all. So we just have to find this balance thing. And, you know.
So Tom, let me go back and challenge your previous statement.
Yes.
When you said, you know what, I wouldn't change anything. That's how you feel about our worship?
I said that I wouldn't change the culture of our church, because I'd like I'm sure there would be things that I would like to see happen or not happen. And there's a person I can bet on a person while we're singing doing a monster yawn during worship every Sunday morning, and it drives me nuts. It's not you. It's not you.
I've never seen
But
it.
no, but yeah, but so there are some things that I would love to see, and I would love to see people come to church in the morning and be excited and ready to worship, because I'm excited and ready to worship. But you don't necessarily see that, and that, you know I don't see the person's heart, but you know, when we go to a movie or we're going to somewhere really great to eat, or we're going to a concert or something, we're showing some type of excitement. But then when we come to church, it's like, you know. But no, I love the culture of our church, because there is an idea that, you know, we can learn, and we may have been wrong, or not wrong, we just may have thought of it differently back then, you know. Wrong's the wrong word to use. Yeah. Does that go around your question enough, Mary?
Yeah, it's an appropriate attempt to avoid it, and that's fine. I think
I would just like to see people able to express themselves in worship the way that they would like to. Because I have had people come up and tell me, I want to raise my hands in worship, or I want to kneel in worship. Can you just tell everybody to raise their hands so we can? So, you know what I mean? And so it's like, well, you know, I could, and then there would be, you know, a quarter of us that would be having a pure form, like we'd be raising our hands and it would be pure and true, and then there'd be other people going like, what am I doing? I'm like raising my, you know what I mean? And so for that other group, that wouldn't work.
Well,
Just be an acceptance thing.
the other part of it is you have to stop and think of how far we've come already. I mean, we aren't the church we were 5 years ago, and I don't think we're going to stop. So, and I think of it as this: we're in that transition. You know, look, the church. I mean, we just got through church history, and the church has changed constantly. There's never been a generation that's been. So, I mean, this is not like this is new to this culture. It's always been.
Well,
it's
it's
just
not-
we're experiencing it, so it gets hurt.
It's not new to any denomination or any group.
You know, or any
They're
time
all going through.
And it's not change for change's sake
No.
either. It's, you know,
Learning thing.
Yeah,
it's a
and-
growth. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, there's really can't be a goal that you can ever see. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The day that everybody's on their knees with their hands raised,
It's like, okay,
okay,
my
so
job's
now,
done.
you know, that's not
You're
the
a
goal.
teacher or
Let's
something.
get a paradigm.
Yeah, so it's,
Well, you also need to recognize, I think that if you think about our human relationships, in, say, dating then through marriage, and you say at first, it's really exciting, and it's like loud exciting, and you want to do stuff all the time, and that's wonderful. And then you look at an older couple who still really love each other. I purposely look at pictures. You look at an older couple that still loves each other, and there's often just a quiet, you sit next to each other and you think, you know what, this is good. This is nice. I really like being with you. And there's no less love there. There's less movement.
Nice recovery. Very nice recovery.
There's,
You don't know that.
and
There's always
I do that.
it's never wishing to get that out of my head. But there's a calm, yes, this is right.
Yeah.
That comes in some relationships. And there's room for people to be that way, to be on fire about God at one time, and other times to just be kind of sitting in church, not even singing along, looking to you like they're not participating, while somebody's going, you know what? This is really nice.
Yeah.
This just feels good. And for some people, it might be the week that they've got all their family back with them. And they're not even singing out loud, they're just watching their grandkids singing and doing stuff, and they may not even be participating to you, but to them, they're feeling like, you know, I'm complete right now, and this is a wonderful way to worship God. So, since we can only see the outward manifestations, I think what we have to do is keep working as a church on the heart of everybody,
Amen.
and then let
Amen.
the worship be an outgrowth of the fact that we're all working on our heart, instead of saying, our worship will be a time when you show this,
Yes.
and you won't show this, and that's how it's going to be. And you're trying to legislate the heart.
Well, yeah, and there's two things in this class. You know, we're talking about forms of worship, but there's people that feel like I'm not being fulfilled because I want to express myself, but I'm told that I'm acting more righteous than somebody else. And then there's people that I feel like maybe they've never even thought of it, or you know what I mean? And so anyway, I've talked about all this before. Let's move on.
I think that's a really good point that Brian raised
Yeah.
up, and I think that there's this miscommunication between the two camps, if you will. There's this sense that if I don't do this, then you guys are judging me, you think you're more righteous. That even came out, those words came out in a blog. Very offensive. Because I'm not judging anybody who's not doing what I do. But there's this misconception that we are. So I would change that. I think that if we all truly loved each other, then we would be okay with the person who wants to sit and be quiet and introspective, and that person would love and respect the person who wants to express themselves. But we have this whatever, and it drives me crazy.
Just like.
And it drives me crazy that someone would publicly display dislike and almost outrage because the video went 2 minutes longer than they thought was appropriate. That's wrong. You don't like the video, come up, talk to the elders, talk to you or something like that, but to jump up in the middle of church and slam a door and storm out is so inappropriate. So, those
Well,
are
and
the,
there's
those are the
extremes on this, you know.
Well,
but yeah, and Curtis's sermons here, like those two sermons that he did, like that was totally, you know, he hit the nail on the head with those. You know, we need to be loving each other, but
well,
Yeah.
and we need to, you know, it's all in our focus, you know? Because we don't want to get stuck on, you know, you don't want to get stuck on that thought. Do you know what I mean?
no.
Of you being angry at this person, how inappropriate they were, because think of all the
I'm not
times
angry at that person. I just think that if
that action was.
we are the body of Christ love each other, then you're not gonna do something like that.
Right. But the reality is that we're all human and we all
Oh,
do
no,
stupid
absolutely.
things. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's also that spirit of, we move past.
Mhm.
You know, and yes, there's always gonna be people that are gonna do things that are inappropriate, or they're gonna overreact, or they're gonna, you know, but do we spend our time focusing on that and worrying about all the people that are overreacting and worrying about people that are persecuting us because, you know, or whatever, or do we move on and do God's work? I mean, you know, it's about God's work, and very little time relatively does he spend on how we act during the actual form of worship. You know, it's all on your heart, and it's what do you do. We know this, we've talked about this many times, but what do you do when you're out of this place, and how do you respond to the people around you? So, boy, it's a struggle. I mean, that's really what worship is what we do when we're not.
You know, we're struggling right this minute in our home with, are you here to bring me up, or am I here to bring you up? Kind of a mode for church. You know, Katie wanted to church, and I said, well, you know, some people are counting on you, and they're going to be lifted up on you. I know their one is going to be lifted up on you. I said, well, I think Kelly counts on you to help the children's church, and I think that, you know, Hunter and Liam are glad that you're there helping, and I think, you know, some people are getting something out of you being there instead of just you thinking you're not getting very much out of you being there.
She thinks no one appreciates it, no one notices.
Nobody notices, nobody appreciates. You know, she's talking about a lot of kids in the high school class or something, and I said, but you know what? You know, you're building some other people up while you're there. And church isn't just to build you up, it's also for you to build others up. So, you know, we're very much in that whole, what am I doing here, and should I even be here, kind of a phase right now. And there are times, I guarantee you, that you come to church and felt like, I hardly even want to be here, and something you said or something you did was just what somebody needed to hear. And they walked away saying, oh man, that was so good, that was so good. And they may not have told you that. They may not have taken the time to walk up and tell you, but it happened. And it wouldn't have if you'd given it to your first thoughts, which were, you know, I didn't feel like being in this morning.
Yeah, no, you're right.
That's interesting, because I used to think that I didn't want to be here, but then when I fully submitted myself, there's no place that I'd rather be. So I would argue that if somebody wakes up on a Sunday morning and doesn't really want to be at church, then they should, maybe they need to examine, I'm not talking about Katie, I'm talking about an adult. Maybe they need to re-examine their relationship with Christ. Because, I mean, I used to feel that way all the time. Oh, Sunday, I'm gonna go. But I wasn't in the right spot, so, anyway.
Well, and I always think that if the days that I don't want to go to church is the day that I really need to go to church. That's when I really need to go to church, you know, because my heart needs to be put where it needs to be. Anyway.
So the obedience factor.
Well, sometimes you almost have to.
What I needed.
Let's face it, like your job is one of the, you need the job, you just keep going.
Keep going.
Because, well, you're glad you find something else, because you know what, it's important. Some things you just gotta do.
Well, and that's right, the right thing to do, because like we saw with Job and with David, like they knew what the right thing was to do, and they went and worshiped God, even though their whole family died, you know. So the Bible's very clear on how we are to live. God gave 10 commandments in the New Testament. You know, Jesus elaborated on them and made them to where we could actually understand them. You know, he says, thou shalt not murder. He says, even if you hate somebody, you know you're committing a sin. So, how does obedience factor into worship? We've seen that worship is not an option for the believer, but it's required of us. We see the examples of that. God tells us to worship and gives us acceptable ways to do it. It is our worship to be willing to obey. We talked about David, his love that he had for God. And it's interesting to read through the Psalms and see the many various ways that David worshipped. And so, I'm skipping. The Psalms gives us 9 different expressions of worship. Okay? Here's where we get crazy. 9 different expressions of worship. These expressions stem from David's desire to worship the Lord wholeheartedly, without reservation. These expressions are not foreign to us, and yet we fail to practice them in our corporate worship for one reason or another. And so what we're going to look at first, probably next week, we'll finish this out. Our spoken voice. These can be broken down into 3 sections. Our spoken voice, our posture, and our hands. Speaking. Psalms 34:1 says, I will extol the Lord at all times. His praise will always be on my lips. Shouting. Psalm 27:6. Then my head will be exalted above my enemies who surround me. In his tabernacle will I sacrifice with shouts of joy. I will sing and make music to the Lord. And singing. Psalm 47:6. Sing praises to God. Sing praises to our King. Sing praises. So we'll finish that out. And I'm so glad that we're having this class.
You know, I was going to say one thing too, that
Yes.
something you said earlier about, you know, we wish we could see everyone with great enthusiasm, you know, each week looking, you wish you could see it, because it would encourage people, you know, it would be nice. And then I was thinking how we maybe don't always show it that much, but have you ever been traveling or something, missed a couple of weeks at church?
Yeah.
And you're, you know what I mean, you don't realize, sometimes you don't realize what you've got until it's gone.
Yeah.
You know, like you really don't appreciate your kids that much until you're away from them for a few weeks. And I miss those little guys. A few weeks. As they get older, it takes longer to.
It sure does.
When they're little, they just imagine it's okay. But
Yeah.
anyway, it's just that human nature thing. And you know, I really miss worship when I've not been here for a few weeks, and I really look forward to singing and seeing people and being together. But you know, we're just so human, darn it, you know?
Yeah. No, you're right.
Well, you know, the other thing is like sometimes when I come to worship, my mood is, like I may have watched The Passion the night before, and my mood is like heavy, like, man, he did this gnarly thing for me, and I'm not in that place where I want to show a bunch of joy. I'm more like heavy, and then other times you might come and be like, woo, shout hallelujah. And so we all have to kind of realize that we all show up on Sunday maybe in a little different place.
We do.
And that's okay.
Yes, absolutely.
What about the people
God reaches
that
in all those places.
are coming, they're hurting,
Yeah.
and we're the
They're just hanging
hospital.
in.
Yeah.
They're just
And
hanging in.
they're not gonna show you outward signs, you know,
Yeah.
they may look
Yeah.
totally like, you know, depressed or
Yeah.
not lifted up, but they need to be there, you
Right.
know?
That's right.
Oh, absolutely.
Like Joe.
Like Joe and Dave. I just mainly, you know, it all comes back to just personally is that, you know, I've been told you can't do certain things. When you tell me that, it's like, well, why? And then I go back and look, it's like, well, you have no reason to tell me I can't do X, Y, Z. Anyway. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, just thank you so much for blessing us with this day, giving us the little bit of sunlight. I just thank you so much for giving us your word and just allowing us to be able to converse about these tough things and just to grow together here. And just thank you for blessing all of us with this church body. It really is awesome. And I know that every single person has their place here in your body to do your work. Lord. Just be with us, you know, strengthen our ministry leaders, and be on people's hearts and get them involved and get them just to make that relationship right with you, to where they truly can become just quenchable worship. Lord. Be with us today as we come to worship you and hear Curtis giving the words that he needs. It's your son's name we pray.
I wanted to tell you,
I turned up the heater. It's just cold in here.
in training.